Hello and welcome everybody. This year is like always the present moment. We're here now, and all thoughts that are in your mind, they're not important right now. They may think about the past, about the future, but when you really are present, then they dissolve or are not so important anymore. They just stay on the surface somewhere, floating around, doing what they do, not doing any harm, because you are present. There's so much thought activity in this world, especially when you go on social media or somewhere, or even other places where many humans are, but that is, most of it is unconscious thought processes, just the ego in different forms playing itself out in individuals and collectives. And trying to impress others, being in some way bigger and more important. The ego always wants to be superior to others, so it tries to create some kind of narrative inside the mind that it is superior in some way, which may be based in some truth or in delusion, which is quite often the case. But the ego does not care as long as there is a feeling of superiority. It always strives for superiority, and once we become aware of the ego inside ourselves, this striving falls away. And of course, we does not mean that we don't engage in this world and don't do things, but we do it then without this egoic entity in our mind, which always seeks comparison and superiority, but then this falls away. So you live your life and you don't compare yourself to others anymore. And you either do not feel superior and you do not feel inferior, which is the awakening, which is the transcendence. The transcendent space, this transcendent space can only become a reality for you if and when you can loosen the grip in which the mind has you right now. There's a certain thoughts in your mind, certain emotion might be there, and reaction patterns to circumstances and situations and people, which you could call the karma, the internal karma of a person, which also affects how things develop outside. then another dimension comes into your life, which could be called the dimension of presence and consciousness. The dimension of spaciousness, as Jesus was talking about spaciousness, the dimension of spaciousness of consciousness. And he was talking about this transcendent dimension inside yourself that can be accessed, which frees you from thoughts and unnecessary suffering, because the egoic self always creates suffering in some form for itself and for others. It's a part of being trapped in the ego. When you are trapped in the ego, you create suffering for yourself and others. And once you become freed of the ego, it becomes less, until you can live a life which does not harm anybody and is still powerful and effective. So you can still create things and do things and even be better at creating and doing things. Because the one huge obstacle some people life, their own mind is not there anymore, then there is a consciousness flowing through them, then that can become and often becomes a beautiful expression of life itself. But the first step is to recognize that internal dimension within yourself, realize it, discover it. It's realize you don't achieve it, you don't create it. It's already there. It has always been there, and it will always be there. This transcendent dimension inside yourself. You just have to acknowledge it and allow it to rise in you fully. Because this is the goal of life, is to be a person. You are a person, some kind of person, which consists of different things, and of course the past plays a role about who you are now on a level of person. But there is also the transcendent, which is beyond the person, which has nothing to do with the person, and it also transcends dysfunctional patterns in the mind of the person and in the emotional field and in their behavior. When there's really dysfunctional behavior, this becomes dissolved and eroded through presence. That is the freedom of suffering that the Buddha was talking about. He said there are these Four Noble Truths, and he talked about there is suffering in the world, there is a cause for that suffering, the mind, the identification with the mind. There is a way out of suffering, and the fourth is the way out of suffering, which means living in a higher vibrational frequency, which is not a mind concept, but it can be a lived reality. It's a common word these days, or more popular, living on a higher vibration, and there is a lot of truth to that, because once you become freed of the ego, the egoic mind, you raise your vibrational frequency of the whole body. Your whole being is on a higher vibrational frequency. Which consists of thoughts, emotions, and states of being. And activity, conscious activity, are a huge part of that. Because to engage in conscious activity, there has to be some opening to this transcendent dimension inside yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't be engaged in conscious activity. There are quite a few people in this world who never heard something about spiritual teaching, and they engage in conscious activity in one way or another, and that is beautiful and wonderful. But they also have to awaken not only there in that part of their life, but in their whole life as much as possible. Because there are many people which are very conscious in some area, and the rest of their life they're as unconscious as most humans, or even more unconscious. And then this is often where some people which are great in their what they do, they then may become drug addicted or something else, I don't know. Because they have this wonderful experience of being present on a high vibrational frequency, and the rest of their life it's not there. There's something missing. They could also have that in their whole life, this beautiful experience of consciousness, of presence, which dissolves all forms of fear and anger and resentment and all these negative forms of states. They become transcended and they don't arise anymore. Then you are beyond that. Like the Zen master living on an edge, on a sharp edge, so present, so fully there that nothing can enter. Nothing unreal can enter the space, which is a negative emotion, for example, is created somewhere by the unconsciousness. But most people don't know that they create their own misery and unhappiness. They don't know. Please forgive them, because they don't know what they are doing. Another thing that Jesus said, and which is very true, they don't know. They are in the grip of their own mind, of their own unconsciousness, of the ego. To break free of that is enlightenment, if you want to use that term, liberation, freedom. True freedom is not an external state of possessing a lot of things and being able to do anything you want. True freedom, no, they may be in the grip of their mind all the time, which is no freedom at all. True freedom is not being trapped in the mind anymore. That is fulfillment on the deepest level. Nothing else in the world can fulfill you when you don't have this dimension inside yourself. And when you have this dimension inside yourself, you can also have external things at the same time and achieve things, and that's wonderful. But it will be something that comes out of the present moment, out of consciousness. There's a line, it's the first line of the book, A Course of Miracles, it just comes into my mind. I think it's like that, nothing unreal exists, and nothing real has ever been injured, or something cannot be touched. Which points to the primary reality, which is not the external world, but the internal dimension of consciousness, which is totally beyond this world. And you need to be alert in your life, not to be catched and drawn by the stream, or one stream of the mind, or many different streams of the mind that are floating around in this world. Sometimes individual stuff and sometimes collective streams of thoughts that are like trains floating around, and can just observe them and let them pass. You don't need to jump onto them, the unconsciousness. You can still engage, fully engage in your life, relationships, job, finances, physical, which needs appropriate action. Your living situation. Your finances, they're all part of the person, or what makes up the person. That's not the essence of the person, just a form identity. Once you know that, all the other things become like a play, like a game. Do your best and engage, but it's not ultimately important. It's not it's not your whole world, it's a part of your life, not your life itself, which exists beyond that. Thank you.